So why can't we be friends? The band asked that question in 1975 famously. Jesus, I think he asked the same question, addressed the same topic just 2,000 years ago on a hill. So we're going to jump in right away today. If you can, open up your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We have free Bibles underneath the chairs. I'll be reading from page 678. They'll be on the TVs behind me. Get out your iPhone, whatever you want to do. I will read the text out loud for us. Follow along with me. Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' which I'm sure we all call each other Raka, right? It just means blockhead or stupid. I'm sure we say that sometimes. Okay, anybody who says Raka is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' they'll tell you in seminary that most people don't know Greek. That's a lie too. The word here is moros, which is where we get the word moron. So you moron, you'll be in the danger of the fire of hell. Okay. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar first. Go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." Who here has watched Dateline, NBC? Any show of hands? Okay, actually, a lot of you. If you don't know Dateline NBC, it's kind of a well-known TV show, and they'll show you a bunch of true crime stories. One of the things that I recently, in the last couple of weeks, learned about Rachel, my fiance, is that before she met such a sweet, handsome, charming boyfriend, she would spend all of her Friday nights, she and her mom together, watching Dateline NBC. Gotta love the single life. And actually, from what I understand, they just did that this past Friday night too, right? Okay, so the tradition is still alive. If you know anything about Dateline NBC, most of their true crime stories are these murder stories where these crazy, psycho, creepy people that you know, your relatives, your best friends, your neighbors, your boss, well, they end up murdering you. And it leaves you with this sick feeling. You kind of go to bed worried that the next day you're going to wake up, you're going to go get your mail or something, and I don't know, your best friend's going to pop out of the bush and stab you or something. I mean, it's crazy stuff that happens there. The fascinating aspect, though, of all these true murder stories, though, is that these gruesome, horrific homicides start with some small, little issue. Money stolen from someone feels betrayed, there's a family argument, I don't know, maybe it even all just starts with some spouse not making dinner the way that the other wanted to. Whatever it is, it always starts with someone feeling wronged in some capacity. And then sure enough, weeks, months, years of just kind of sitting on this lurking anger, resentment, grudge, well, it slowly but surely leaks into them actually killing someone. And all of a sudden then, something that we once thought was completely not even relatable to us, right? Murder. Let's all be honest. A human being killing another human being. I doubt there's too many of us in this room that are thinking those thoughts or that have done that. But once you see Dateline NBC and they set it in that context with that scenario and those emotions, I think we all can relate and feel those every day. And so isn't this kind of our reaction to Jesus' words here? You have heard that it was said of the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Well, of course. Come on, Jesus. We all know murder is wrong. You don't need to kind of quote us the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. We get it. None of us probably do that. Right? That's kind of all the other people, all the bad people, the people that you see in Dateline NBC, they're the ones that are committing murder. Not us, good people. We wouldn't dare do such a thing. And that's just why I love Jesus here. Because he knows that's what you're thinking. And that's exactly the same thing that the religious leaders back then thought. The religious leaders back then, your conservative Bible-believing Christians, if you will, were the Pharisees and the scribes. And as a quick side note, I was reminded of this as I was preparing for this sermon. It is quite alarming. If you think about it, who are the people that Jesus spends the most time debating with? You probably think, oh, it's the skeptics, the atheists, I don't know, the scum of society, whoever, whatever. Not the religious people, but it's actually the religious leaders that Jesus debates the most with. And so it's interesting, the people who claim that they're following God the most are the ones that Jesus actually calls out the most. Something for us just to kind of chew on as we read Scripture. Okay, Jesus, aren't you exaggerating a little bit here? You're really equating anger with murder. And you say that whoever is angry with his brother or his sister, his friend, his family member, whoever it is, well, that's the same thing as murdering them. We're all thinking that, right? And isn't it interesting? Well, it's even more interesting because back then in that world, in the ancient Jewish culture, if you murdered someone intentionally and consciously, well, your punishment, the judgment, would be the death penalty. You'd be killed, and that was the judgment that's mentioned here. Now, whether or not you're for the death penalty or not, it's okay, understandable. You killed someone, so you'll be killed. That's how much God values life. That's at least the way they understood it, and they took it. And that's exactly what Jesus says, is that, if you're angry at someone, that's the same judgment that you're going to receive. Death penalty. Okay. Pretty exaggerated. Seems a little out of proportion. But Jesus isn't done. He continues on. Again, anyone who calls a brother or sister stupid, it's answerable to the court. And anybody who calls someone a moron, there's a couple of laughs there, will be in the danger of the fire of hell. Some more rhetorical flair for you. And to be clear here, Jesus isn't talking about anger in general, because if you know Jesus actually got angry quite a bit, right? He exhibits what we would call righteous anger. And so there's examples of him where he gets angry at matters of injustice, and so should we now. Sex trafficking exists in Orange County in LA. We should be angry at that. We should be angry at the blurring of truth and other important ethical matters. Nothing wrong with anger. Is Jesus here debating capital punishment? Whether someone should be killed or not? Is he talking about, is murder acceptable in the context of war? Right? There's all these hypothetical questions that we can think of and that we ask about murder and anger. Great questions. I'm not minimizing any of those. All I want us to do this morning is to put those to the side. And let's just look at the type of anger that Jesus is focusing on here. Because I don't think he's actually exaggerating all that much. And that's the point. He's on to something. He's getting to the real issue, the heart of the matter, so to speak. He's talking about that type of deep-seated, lurking, constant anger, grudge, and resentment. The type of anger that leaks out as gossip, slander, unkind words, calling people moron and stupid, mean-spirited emails, criticalness. We all probably know people like that in life, and it's never us, right? It's always like those other people. But is it perhaps that the sixth commandment that Jesus quotes here, what if that's intending to address and prevent that exact attitude? See, Jesus is exposing the human heart here, and he does that pretty well usually. And he's putting all of us humans on the same level playing field. Not just the murderers and the killers over there, and then us good religious church people over here. Think of it this way, as one author put it, he's saying murder is a tree. I know it's a weird and metaphor analogy, but just hang with me. He's saying murder is a tree. Trees grow from acorns, right? At least oak trees do. So what is a seed? What is an acorn? What does murder start with? What's the seed of murder? Okay, well, it's arrogance, disdain, hatred, treating a person not as a person, but looking down on them, thinking of them as an object. And he says the only difference between you and a murderer is that unless you welcome every single human being into your life, every single person that you come into contact with, that if you treat them with value, with worth, with respect, but if you just disdain certain people, ignore them, don't even care about them, he says that's a seed. And the only difference between you and a murderer is the murderous seed that hasn't been watered and fertilized. We all have the same seed. The issue is whether does our seed of murder get watered and fertilized? Is it given the opportunity to commit murder? And so the sixth commandment that Jesus quotes here is really getting after someone who cherishes people. Even the people that the world says are of no consequence, insignificant, just nobodies, that you treat them as kings and queens. That's the kind of heart that Jesus says the law, the sixth commandment, is going after. So the beginning, the root and motivation of all those Dateline NBC murder stories actually don't seem all that far off now, do they? It's the same seed. Jesus, why can't we all be friends? Doesn't our culture today place such a high value on love, peace, and respect? Those are good things that we value, we celebrate. We don't want to be people of anger and hate. We don't even like being around people who are always full of anger and resentment, right? Those people, they kind of just like suck the joy out of life. And we usually think of anger as kind of an individual thing. Anger is actually a community problem. And that's because if you're always around someone who's always angry and always negative and always disrespectful, it just rubs off on you. You get in a bad mood. You don't want to be around them. But we're stuck in the reality of verses 21 through 22. What if Jesus offers the way forward? A way actually to counteract our own anger and disdain that we find just naturally bubbling up within us. A way to prevent our own seeds of resentment that can turn into murder. A new way to be human. Let's just say Jesus gives his listeners two pretty radical, practical illustrations here. And no doubt they're hard, they're difficult, they're costly. But really, it's this life-changing blueprint for the way to be genuinely, fully, and gloriously human. The way of reconciliation. Verse 23, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. This scene is almost comical. Scholars kind of laugh like when they read this and they describe it. Because Jesus, again, is kind of exaggerating here. And what he's doing is, we think at this time that he's in Galilee. Okay, and he's talking about someone who's going to go to the temple, which is only in Jerusalem, to go offer a sacrifice, which is their annual form of worship. Well, the thing is, if you're in Galilee, that's 80 miles walking distance from Galilee to Jerusalem. So Jesus says, you walk 80 miles to Jerusalem, you get to Jerusalem, you get into the temple, you have your lamb, you're ready to sacrifice, you're before the presence of God. Oh, you know what? That grudge that I have with Johnny back in Galilee, I should probably go back to him and set it right and seek forgiveness. So you drop your sacrifice, you go back to Galilee, then from Galilee you go back to Jerusalem to alter your sacrifice, and then you go back from Jerusalem to go back to Galilee. That would take a week's worth of a journey. Crazy. In simple Southern California terms, picture it this way. This morning, instead of coming here, you'd walk to a church in Simi Valley or Thousand Oaks. It's about 80 miles walking distance. Some good exercise, you know? You get there, they got the music playing, prelude, you find your seat, you get a program, you put it on the seat. Oh, you know what? My wife, she offended me, and I need to go set things right with her. Let me scurry all the way back to Artesia. So you put the program on the seat because you want to reserve your seat. You don't want anybody to take your seat. Yeah, we know it's true. You go back to Artesia. By the way, you're walking there. You get to Artesia, you set things right, then you walk back to Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and then you walk back to come home. Crazy. God cares more about reconciliation than he does worship. Why? Because a life that doesn't pursue reconciliation isn't really a life of worship. God cares more about reconciliation than he does worship. Because a life that doesn't pursue reconciliation isn't really a life of worship. Jesus then provides another illustration for the importance of reconciliation, set in a different tone, almost in a more threatening scenario. He says, you and your neighbor are actually going before a judge to fight out your legal differences, probably some type of financial debt. He says, you know what, actually, don't even go to court. Actually, on your way to court, sort it out beforehand. Literally, make friends quickly. Seek out the kind of reconciliation that creates friendship out of adversarial relationships, and don't allow bad relationships to go unresolved. Why? Well, because the judge will have his way, and the process of justice may lead you to prison, and then you'll have to pay every single penny that you have, because you'll be stuck in prison, which means you can't work. And if you're not working, you're not making money. And if you're not making money, you can't pay off the interest that's accumulating while you're in prison. You're screwed. Exaggerated, overstated, incredible. Sure. That's the point. Jesus is for reconciliation, even if it means interrupting sacred actions and legal judgments. Like I said, don't most of us want loving and peaceful and respectful relationships? I think most of us do. We all want to be friends, as that band said. Like, reconciliation sounds great. We'll rock that mantra until reconciliation means a personal demand in your marriage, your family, with your neighbors, at work, dare I say, with friends at church. Then all of a sudden, we kind of back up. Oh yeah, we don't do that. That's impossible, Mark. That's not real life. Impossible? Until you look at Jesus. Because reconciliation isn't simply like an ideal that we have to strive towards. It's an achievement, it's an accomplishment that Jesus already did for us, in which we are at odds with him. Our relationship, our world, was at odds against God. This might sound crazy, but God was actually highly disturbed, and is, at all of our acts of hatred, murder, anger that we've done towards him, toward each other, and towards the rest of creation. Here's the kicker. Jesus left his place of worship his altar and died on a cross for you, bearing all of our anger so that we might be reconciled to the one that matters the most. Until you realize this, until this seeps into your heart and gets at the core of who you are, I don't think you'll actually ever come to a place where these extreme examples of reconciliation make sense, where it's actually possible to live out this new way of being human. You won't be able to, at least not consistently. Sure, yeah, maybe a couple times, but I'm talking about as a lifestyle, at the core of who you are, that you just live a life of reconciliation in all of your relationships. Because I honestly believe, I know myself, I'm pretty darn selfish. You're not going to have the incentive to go and be reconciled with people until you realize that that's exactly what God has done for you in Jesus. Now, there are good things and there are bad things about preaching. The good thing, if you do it right and you immerse yourself in the text and you're preparing, you're praying through it, you're meditating on it, God will convict you and he will challenge you and you'll feel like a hypocrite if you don't actually live it out. That's the good thing about preaching. The bad thing about preaching is that you'll get convicted, God will challenge you, and you'll feel like a hypocrite if you don't live it out. The life of a preacher. So here I am, last Saturday. It wasn't my birthday, but we were celebrating my birthday that night. We're going out to dinner, and I am just craving Mexican food. So breakfast and lunch, I don't eat anything. I'm trying to eat healthy, so it's I'll just starve myself to death. That way I can just eat a lot at night, and I can really enjoy the Mexican food. So 7:30, my family and I, we roll out. I'm totally going to butcher the name. Forgive me. La Capella. It's in La Palma. Who's been there? Ooh, okay. So shout out to Israel. Israel was the one that suggested it to me on Facebook. It lived up. It was great food. Absolutely loved it. So we get there and walk in, get there a little early, and he's like, hey, we don't take reservations. It'll be about a 30-minute wait. Okay. So we wait outside. It's nice weather. We're all catching up, family and stuff. And it's been about 30. I think it's probably been 40 minutes. So we kind of move inside. And then one of the hosts walks up to me and he says, hey, we can seat you now. But the only thing is actually we won't be able to put you at the same table. But I can put you at two separate booths, but they're right next to each other. They're kind of in the same cave, same area. It's kind of birthday, we want to be together, we want to talk. And he's like, well, but if you don't want that, you'll have to wait a little bit longer. So, okay, well, how much longer? 5 minutes, 15 minutes? He's like, oh, no, actually 30, 35 minutes. I'm like, dude, why didn't you tell us this at the beginning? Now that's going to be hour, 15 minutes. I'm starving, dude. So this anger and frustration, it's bubbling up within me, and I voiced it to him. I was frustrated. It's kind of hey, man, why didn't you think about this beforehand? Where's the organizational skill in this? I worked at a restaurant before. I know how it goes down. And then right in the middle of me voicing my anger, there's a booth about 15 yards out, 6 people. They get up, they pay their check, they're out, and there's a perfect booth for us. And I'm like, what about that? And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, you can sit there. And then I'm like, why? How do you not know that? What's going on here? I've been a host before at a restaurant. You check, you make sure everyone's got their check, and you know when people are going to open up and get seated. So we had a great dinner. I'll go there again. I absolutely loved it. But the next day, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm talking about anger, and the way to counteract anger is reconciliation. That's a tough one there, Mark. Oh, and then I also remember I was wearing a Christian shirt that day that said grace and forgiveness. It actually said validated sinner, which is actually, that is the story. I'm a sinner, but I'm validated. Amen. So I started thinking, and I'm like, okay, I've worked at retail and restaurants before. There's been a lot of times where I haven't brought my A game, and people have still been pretty gracious to me, pretty loving. Sure, you have those bad customers, but there's been people that have been totally gracious with me when they could be highly frustrated. So Mark, have people forgiven you before? Have you been in that situation before? Yeah. And you don't know what's going on in his life. Maybe he had a horrible family argument that morning. Maybe he had a headache. Maybe his boss just chewed him out. I have no idea. Maybe he just got in. It was the start of a shift, and it was other people's fault who were before him. I have no idea, and that's the point. So, okay, I should probably go back in there and apologize to this guy. So a couple days later, it's on my way back home from here. I stopped in there. He's in there. So I walk up to him. I'm like, hey, man. I'm probably thinking, like, this probably never happened to him. Like, some guy's going to apologize. And I say, hey, do you remember me? This is the best part. He says, oh, yeah, your name's Mark. And I'm like, okay, dang, dude. You guys, like, keep a hit list of people or something? What's going on here? And I say, hey, man, like, I'm actually just here to apologize. Like, I was kind of a punk to you last Saturday. I was frustrated. Like, I totally shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry. Like, I just wanted to apologize. And he was like, hey, no worries. Totally cool. He was extremely gracious, extremely gentle. So then I left and went home. And sure, it's a great story, and I don't say it to lift myself up. If anything, I showed as an example to show my own weakness and brokenness. But isn't that the way that the kingdom of God is? That's that phrase that Jesus always uses, and it's a kingdom of reconciliation. And the way the kingdom works, the way it spins, the dynamics of it, is that when you've been reconciled, that leaks out to other relationships in your life. You can't really show someone grace until you've received grace. You can't really forgive someone until you've been forgiven. You get that, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, I understand. And this is the same thing that Paul, who is the first church planter, essentially, in the history of Christianity, he said this to a church in Corinth. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, he says, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. And so the way of life, as Jesus presents it here on the Sermon on the Mount, these aren't just more religious laws, moral obligation, more things you have to follow. Like, that's the cheap stuff. That's the stuff on the service of the table. And that's exactly why Jesus harks at the religious leaders. Because Jesus goes deeper. He says, let me grab your heart. And that's the kingdom. Jesus goes to the underlying motivation and intention of everything, as he did with the ancient command, do not murder. And so we have this opportunity to show this new way of being human. We can live this radical, desirable, simple, but almost impossible way of reconciliation once we get in our bones that we are at odds with God and he reconciled us to himself in Jesus. Once that seeps into you, the question becomes, what relationships of yours that are filled with anger, disrespect, and resentment need reconciliation? And it'd be easy to kind of bring up all the global monstrous problems and issues that need reconciliation, problems in the Middle East, Rwanda, Ferguson, extreme and noteworthy examples. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I wonder if the bigger problems of reconciliation all start with our own local and personal issues. Relationships between your marriage, in your family, mothers and fathers with their children, like I said, in your neighborhood, work, and here's the sticky one, in your church. I was talking a couple weeks ago to a couple who goes here, and they're on their second marriage, so they've been divorced before and remarried, and they're telling me about a marriage counseling program that they went through at another church, actually a very well-known church. This is years ago. And do you know what this marriage program required of them if you were divorced and you were seeking a second marriage? Both parties, both people, had to go seek reconciliation with their ex-spouses. I mean, come on, that's I'm not married yet, but oh man, I don't even want to think about that. But what needs reconciliation in your life? The interesting thing, too, if you notice what Jesus said there, he kind of sneaks it in. If you're offering your gifts at the altar, and remember that your brother or sister has something against you, he's not talking about what you have towards someone. He's talking about if someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice, go and be reconciled to them. So let's go back to reality now, if we're all honest. I can be willing to bet that most people in this room right now are thinking, okay, so, next time I see Lauren at the gym, I'll apologize to her. Or next time I see, I'm just using generic names, by the way, Bob at next month's sales meeting, yeah, I'll apologize to him. That's not going to work. Be urgent. Listen to Jesus' words here. Leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the road. Don't put it off, otherwise it just won't happen. There's never a convenient time to pursue reconciliation, right? I can always think of an excuse. I can always think of something to do that. It's a good idea before I go and seek reconciliation with someone. We have cell phones today. We have email. We have texting. We have Facebook. We have Skype. I'm just going to be bold. We don't have an excuse. Seek out reconciliation today. Just wait till I'm done preaching. But seriously, do it one-on-one. Do it in person. Don't write someone a letter. Leave your name off. Don't talk to other people about your anger and resentment and have that turn into gossip and slander. Go directly to the person. Get a cup of coffee. Talk it out. Just how we do relationships. Yeah, do we want to be a healthy church? We got to take seriously Jesus' command of biblical reconciliation then. Because we're going to have anger. We're going to have conflict. That's okay. We're all broken people. Reconciliation assumes that something's gone wrong. And we're going to disagree with each other on things. That's okay too. But just remember this. There's a difference between disagreement and anger. One involves that lurking, deep resentment. That's way more than just disrespect. So why can't we all be friends? We can. Jesus shows us a new way to be human, the way of reconciliation. And once we understand that in Jesus' kingdom, we've been reconciled in a profound way to the one who matters the most, rather than calling people names behind their back, spreading gossip and dissension, personally attacking them, and just building up more anger and just wallowing in it, sitting in it, you're just going to become a grumpy person. I don't think any of us want that. So how can we humbly, courageously, and lovingly seek reconciliation with those whom we have a grudge towards or who have a grudge towards us? This is reconciliation. This is the kingdom. So I'm going to invite the music team back up. Hey, this is heavy stuff. All right, whether it's Small issues of being angry with someone who's a host, or maybe a larger issue, right? Asking your ex-spouse and being reconciled with them. That's a big issue. So I don't know where any of us are. We have different stories, different experiences. But I do know that we all need to respond in reconciliation. And so we have different ways to respond, as we always do. Maybe you're here and you just need to be reminded that you have been reconciled in the most profound way to the one who matters most. So I encourage you to take communion. The bread and the juice represents what Jesus did for you on the cross. And maybe you're here, and let's just be honest, you are an angry person. I've been there. There's been times where I've been pretty angry. Can we just pray for you, listen to you, support you, come alongside you? So there'll be a prayer team in the back. Light a candle. Like, there is hope. Redemption can't exist in unhealthy relationships. Maybe it just seems weird to you. So just stay seated. We're going to sing 2 songs. Just try to reflect. But I don't want us to leave this place without asking God, who do I need to be reconciled with? And you know what? I don't even plan to say this, but maybe that means you leave the service right now and you go call someone. Yeah. That's following this text. Following Jesus is not easy. We'd be lying if we didn't tell you that. But I got to tell you, it's the best way to live.